Welcome to Founders Raw.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right, Bob. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
I just want to have a good chat.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, we like to just review and talk about the experience as an entrepreneur. And I noticed that you've done a lot of things. So let's go back and really we're going to go way back.
All right.
Let's talk about how you got into and how maybe you discovered that you're an entrepreneur and what your path was.
Yeah, so I actually came from a very entrepreneurial family. When I was growing up, my parents had no fewer than, there's transitions, like when does one business stop and another one start? Sometimes it's hard to tell, but no fewer than 5.
Wow.
None of them in technology. Technology didn't exist when I was, growing up.
You're that old.
I'm that old. My parents had the foresight to move. We actually was born in Oakland and lived in Silicon Valley before it was Silicon Valley.
Wow.
And just as it was sort of like, if you look at the timeline of the companies that were there, they were hatching, like technology starting and VC starting, that's when we moved out. So we left and I spent most of my youth in Sacramento. So we had businesses like raising rabbits. We had a commercial rabbitry. So we had basically butchering rabbits for grocery stores.
Yeah.
And then, I credit my dad, and I think I have some of this too. He'd say, like, we've got these hides from these, what do we do with these? We were just like, somebody would come by with a truck, they'd pick them up, they'd go do something with them, we didn't know. He's like, so he'd do the research. There's no internet back then, right? So he'd figure out, you know what, these guys are taking them, they're going and they're tanning them. So why can't we tan them, right? So he'd learn how to do that, and these are really caustic chemicals, and there's these 7-year-old kid running around in this caustic environment. So I had a job. When I was working in the family businesses by the time I was 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And my entire life growing up, I was working in the family businesses. So that raising rabbits actually came first out of raising St. Bernards. So my parents were breeders, raising actually show dogs in San Francisco. And then, so they can raise animals. So what's a good commercial animal? A rabbit. Okay. So we got to slaughter that thing. We got the skin. What do we do with it? Well, we were stretching them, so you put them on a hanger. My job was to take this, bushel baskets of bloody rabbit hides and stretch them on hangers and hang them up to dry, right? And then the truck comes by and picks them up, And my sister and I, oh man, stories. And then it's like, well, what do they do with them after they tan them? So we learned how to tan. So now we're actually selling tan skins, adding value, the price goes up. And we found out, well, what they're doing really is they're making coats and hats and gloves. And like, well, couldn't we do that? Which led to, well, now we're cutting up fur, and we got this massive, the best thing that ever happened in that time frame was a big contract with this company that sold college rah-rah gear, right? So hats in your school colors and pom-poms in your school colors. You probably don't remember this. Well, you're a little gray.
Not as old as
Do you remember like rabbit foot keychains?
Yeah.
And furball keychains?
Yeah.
Furball keychains. We were the biggest manufacturer of furball keychains in school colors. So we had to learn how to dye the fur into different colors. So we'd get these orders. And in my house, we had sewing machines set up, and the women would come in my house, and they'd be sewing on them. And then we had all these scraps of paper, scraps of fur left in all different colors. And my mom was something of an artist. And she had the bright idea, well, God, you could do a paint by numbers, but with fur. So you cut out the little piece of fur and the shape, and you do like a Bugs Bunny character or something like that, right? So we were doing fur picture kits. Talk about like kitsch. I swear I would give a year's salary. I'll give 10% of my next exit to anyone who can find me one of those if they still exist. This was back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
And if you have a fur picture kit, well, what about you putting a frame in there so when you're done making your fur picture, you can frame it? So we got in the wood business. We started manufacturing picture frames.
Yeah.
Well, if you have picture frames, add to that product line, so, well, how about cork boards and chalkboards? And that spun up really, really big. We had 80 employees, big warehouse. And we had all this equipment now. We could make anything out of wood. So we're making wood furniture, and just from one thing to another to another.
What I'm seeing is a trend of just like realizing value, like the next step of value, and then creativity, and meeting a need. And
at each step it's like, well, that works okay, and now we would call it a pivot. It's like, well, you just found a new a market pivot or a product pivot or customer pivot or whatever. And so we did that my whole life. So we bought our house, mobile home, manufactured home. We lived on a few acres, so we moved this house onto our property. and a brand new car for cash. We didn't, no getting a loan for, we just paid cash. By the next year, we're eating beans and franks, right?
Yeah.
And like every night, or eating, you know, when we were in the rabbit business, we'd be eating rabbit meat like 7 nights a week, right? So feast and famine, those whole cycles. So it feels really, it doesn't feel unusual to me to like be doing really well and then be like, I got to make ends meet. That feels very, very natural to me. Not so much for my wife, of course. But yeah, so we went through that whole cycle, and I think, you know, I must have somehow or another, either genetically or through osmosis, been sort of imbued with this notion of, you figure out things you can make, and you sell them, and you build things around them.
Let me stop on that for a second. Yeah. Do you think with you it was more genetic or it was learned? Yeah,
that's a good question. I really think it's both. You know, my graduate degree is in philosophy. And I used to have a lot of conversations in pubs with like all these philosophy grad students arguing nature versus nurture, right? And I'd say I probably started out, I thought it was a lot more nurture than it is nature, but then I had kids. And now I know. I have twins.
Yeah.
Same environment, same everything. 180 degrees different.
Oh, wow.
You come prepackaged in this world with something, right? And it's remarkable how different they are, and I don't think I couldn't make either one of them be the other. But I also think that in my own life, I've changed so much over my life. Mm-hmm. So I have this case study, living case study myself, that I've changed my views, my skills, what's important to me. I've changed so much about my life. I haven't changed who I am. I don't think, I'm not gonna change who I am.
No.
But that entrepreneurial component, I feel like that's, I could have had that. Same genes, exactly the same genes, but my dad went into construction or got a job at IBM, and I may never have exercised it. So taking the raw material that you come to this planet with, I think a lot influences that. I didn't need to be an entrepreneur. It's accidental that I'm an entrepreneur. As it is now, I can't imagine doing anything else.
So to say it a different way, it's almost like because you had those genes, you then were in an environment that seemed normal, so it was very easy for you to just step in and just, why would I not just start my own company?
I mean, there could be some adaptability. Yeah. Like I might have some genetic component that makes me adaptable to the circumstances around the hardships, right, and the thoughtfulness of entrepreneurship and all the other factors. But I've seen so many, I work with a lot of companies through Techstars and these other programs and just started from town. I've seen too many transformative cases where someone came in, there was no genetic, their parents had nothing to do with entrepreneurship, and with the right guidance, they've turned into, I would call them peers. They start out like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, have no idea. I got this idea, I don't even know if it's a good business, but it's a good idea, and I'm gonna build it. And through the forge, especially with Techstars, I mean, what happens in Techstars is inspiring. It's transformative every time. These guys come out the other end, different people. And the majority of them, I look at them and I'm like, I'm gonna knock on your door when I need help, because you guys really, that now, right? And so I think it can be exercised. I think it can be the hard bits about what it means to have the skills and to execute as an entrepreneur. I think that's learnable. Whether or not temperament, you have the temperament for that or not, I don't know. I actually started as an engineer. So I've been mostly on the business side. Most people don't even know I can code. But I was an engineer for 20 years before I ever went on the business side. And, lots of people now, it's very, very vogue to go into engineering and be a Rails developer and make a ton of money, right? It's a great career. Technology is a great career. But I do think that not everyone's cut out for it. And I've helped a few people kind of get there and figure out a career path in technology. Not all of them, once they get there, decide they really want to do it. So I think there are elements in our personality that give us some advantages and some other disadvantages, but who the hell knows, right? Tell me how you're going to determine, right, whether or not you can learn this or not. I don't know. Go try it. If you're successful, it worked. If you're not, try again.
And so let's go back to really your first real experience of starting your first company. What was it, and what was that experience?
Well, so my first company was selling door-to-door when I was a kid, I loved building stuff, and I learned how to create leaded glass, with the copper tape, and you solder it together. So I was making terrariums and pottery things and so forth. And I'd get my box of those. I'd spend like 3 weeks. I'd make them. I'd solder them up, and I'd just go around the neighborhood and go, "You want to buy one, right?" And here's this kid. I was probably, I don't know, I was 11 or 12, and it's awesome, right? I mean, some kid comes knocking on your door and wants to sell you a terrarium that they made, right? Yeah. So I had some success with that, and I did a lot of other similar things like that along the line. When I was in college, I had a job, in technology, and I would always do consulting work on the side, and for the people in the company and so forth. And after a while, it's like I was doing almost as much consulting as I was doing regular work. So I quit my job and said, okay, I'm just going to be a consultant. And that's when I discovered the consulting lifestyle, the contractor life, is awesome, right?
Oh, yeah.
You basically get to pick the work you want to do. They pay you more than you deserve, right? Yeah. You get to take as much time off as you want. I traveled a ton. Yeah. It was terrific. And every 3 months or so, they'd say, hey, you should join. Here, we want you to join this department or that team or something like that.
So they can control you a little
So
more.
they control, yeah. And I never did it. And eventually, I had a colleague of mine, I was at Starbucks actually. I came to Seattle to go to graduate school at UW in philosophy, but I brought my consulting company with me, and that's how I was paying for grad school. And a friend of mine, acquaintance at Starbucks, would come to me occasionally with like entrepreneurial ideas. This is late 90s, it's red hot, and he just wanted to get into something, right? And the things he'd bring me, I was like the tech guy. He's like, we need a CTO. Will you be the guy? And I never saw anything that really I thought it was worth taking the velvet handcuffs off for. So eventually, though, this idea evolved around, what if we create a services firm where we work with mid-sized companies, enterprise, find projects, do those projects, analyze what we built and the market, and see if there's an opportunity to productize something and build a startup out of it. A product company. Yeah. And my very first entrepreneurial lesson, like serious, startup lesson, we went down to pitch some angel investors in Southern California. We're like, here, we got this idea. We're going to go do these projects. If this company needs it, others might need it too. We're going to pick it apart. We're going to figure out, is that a business or not? We had our criteria and so forth, a little process. And they said, God, that sounds great. Come back to us when you figure one of those out. In the meantime, we're not going to fund a services company. And I was dumbfounded, like, why? Look what we're doing. Why wouldn't you want to fund this? And that was the first time I started thinking about financially modeling a company. Yeah. And like, oh yeah, so you look at what the acquisition opportunities are for services companies, like 1x, right? Build $300,000 in revenue, and you basically get to take a year off with $300,000, right? So we set out then to work hard to try to find what's that first product opportunity. And we looked at a number of things. And the first one we came across we thought was bona fide was in healthcare. We were doing doing work for some physicians with their systems. And we came across HIPAA, right? And this physician we were talking to said, hey, I just paid like $6,000 for this binder full of paper, and this consultant says I'm compliant. But I don't know anything about HIPAA. Can you just have a look and let me know if I'm okay? So, oh yeah, we'll take a look. So we did that for him. Utterly uncompliant, right? This vendor sold them like a search and replace, massive documents that they got off the internet, and just did a search and replace on their practice name.
Jeez, dude.
And didn't even get them all. So there's this guy. He's got this binder full of paper, and there's like 4 different practices mentioned through, right? It was nonsense. So we thought, if this guy has that problem,
there's got to be
this is new regulation. Compliance is not optional. We ought to be able to figure out sort of a TurboTax way to do that. I mean, tax laws, complex. Lay people like us have to figure it out and get compliant. So we thought we could build a TurboTax for HIPAA. So we did, and that was the first, serious company to raise a little capital. Built a team, full. That company. What I love about that company is I learned so much because we went full cycle. We built a product, we built a team, we did marketing, we had revenue and customers, we had investors. We had the best product on the market, we were always reviewed as the best. So we feel like we really achieved a lot. Yeah. And then we found out, at that time, if you think back to the administration, White House administration, no appetite at all for enforcement of any regulations, right? They wanted to deregulate. And so the market never showed up. Physicians when they set the budget for HIPAA compliance at $2 million nationwide, you can't barely staff an office in Washington D.C. for $2 million, right? So everybody knew that was a signal that they're not really serious about enforcing compliance. So there we sat, best product on the market. We had marketing relationships all over the country. I was traveling like all the time doing seminars and on HIPAA and so forth. And but we were left with no market. No doctor was taken away in handcuffs on the nightly news. So doctors they didn't take it seriously enough.
So how did you handle that?
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm getting is that was your first, like, it was a quality business, but then no market, you just hit the end.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the upside on that, it wasn't going to be a big fat home run, but it was a solid product that was going to have, a handful of years, 6, 8, 10 years runway. Great tool to be acquired by some other consulting firms who do help physicians get compliance, so forth. But you never want to give up, right? You look at the response. Doctors loved it, right? We probably had 1,000 customers, about $1,000 price point. A lot of those, though, the 1,000 customers were, we gave it away to nonprofit hospitals and things like that. End of the day, we didn't make as much revenue as we had taken in angel capital. Okay. So you're just trying to figure out how can we salvage this. So we built value here. We have the sort of unfortunate, I think, timing, because when we built this product, we were like, we want to do this like online. But if you go back to that era, like 1999, physician practices were barely wired, right? And if they were, they had like a 28.8 modem, right? So you weren't going to do very much online. So we actually had to release that on a CD. So we actually built a CD install product.
Oh, wow.
And in the 2.5 years it took to build this company, the market didn't show up in time for us to have, I think, a reasonable justification for pursuing a SaaS-based model. And so, we're sitting there with the best product in the market, but nobody would want to buy it. And our runway was up. We had to figure out what to do. So at that time, we learned though a lot about physicians, and we learned a lot about HIPAA. And so a company had approached us from California that had a contract with Visa, building transaction payment systems on the Visa backbone for healthcare. Healthcare is massive, trillions of dollars of payments move through that business, that market. And they wanted us to come on and be their outsourced product development team. And we were entrepreneurs. We didn't want to be a shop, right? Well, it was like 2 guys, and it was like a financier, a lot of healthcare background, and then a guy who basically architected the first ATM systems. Very senior guy, older guy. And they built this system, and Visa had put a couple million in it, and they put about $1 million or so in it, but they couldn't get it to work, couldn't get the company off the ground, and we thought we knew why. So we said, we don't want to be your outsourced software development team. We want to acquire the company from you, and we'll show you how it should be done. And so we met with Visa, and Visa said, I re-architected the whole, the way the data flowed and so forth, and Visa's like, okay, good, let's go for this. This makes so much sense. We raised a little bit of capital for down payment for the acquisition. Had a couple of investors. Big lesson learned, and that one was, so we had Visa, and we're like, frickin' Visa. We're working with Visa. Can you believe that?
I know exactly what
and we pitched to some VCs, names not to be disclosed, but we pitched to a couple of VCs around town, and I'll never forget, one of them had said, well, what do you need Visa for? Why don't you guys just go build this yourself? And we're like, you're kidding me. Why wouldn't you want to have Visa as a marketing partner, if nothing else? And I go, okay, go build it and come back and we'll consider it. So, fast forward, a lot happened. Visa had to get an LOI in place in order for us to work with it. Their legal department took, I think it was 10 months to get a non-binding LOI done, right? Now imagine you're raising money and you're talking to investors. And you're like, it's awesome. We got this contract with Visa, we're acquiring this company, massive space, all the trends in the right direction. This is going to be great. We've got a great team, but we need to raise capital to do this, and we'll give you an update. And then
month goes by.
2 months go by, and you're like, here's another update. Yeah, Visa still hasn't gotten off the dime, but we're making progress. Visa was apologizing to us. It was taking so long. We're like, oh, you guys are killing us. We're trying to raise capital here. And after a while, our best investor, finally just had to say, I'm out, because it was taking too long. And we hired a CEO from the Valley or from Southern California who had built a company and sold it to Visa, worked for Visa for a while, left Visa, bought the company back from him, worked on it for a while, sold it back to him again, and then left Visa, and he was going to be the CEO, right? Yeah. He's like, he was a perfect fit. And he got cold feet after it was taking so long. So, now, and we had a similar circumstance with Cisco and a couple of big pharmaceutical companies and following company, and big lesson about startups working with really big companies. Everybody wants to go work with Microsoft or Amazon or whoever it is, right?
Well, I've talked.
If you can live long enough, right? Yeah, exactly.
Like Second said the same thing. I mean, we talked to Nationwide Insurance. We talked to American Express.
Yeah.
We talked to Verifone. I mean, in the payment space, we talked to major players. And the lesson that I tell other people now is, don't believe anything they say. Don't keep going with meetings, but don't count on them.
Yeah.
And it's just like you can't predict anything. And if you're fundraising, I mean, it's just like.
But your first time into that situation, you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe who we're
eyes
working
wide,
with, right?
Yeah. It's
very, very hard, and it's one of those frog in the boiling pot of water kind of a thing.
Yep.
By the time you realize it's too late, you've burnt runway, and credibility and a lot of other things.
Wasted time, development, resources.
Your team is exhausted, so forth. So, we ended up having to wind that one down. Just couldn't get that done. Yeah. As a startup in such a big space, right? I mean, healthcare and financial services, two of the biggest markets on planet Earth. For a startup to be successful in there, right, you better have some runway.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't, you may have the best idea, whether or not it's a good business, and this is something I harp on a lot, there's a huge difference between a good idea and a good business. And it's a subtle thing to understand, whether or not it's a good business depends partly on whether or not you, in your circumstances, with the team you have and the resources you have, whether or not you can get there. You may have a great idea, you may have a top-notch team, but if you don't have capital, you don't have relationships, you don't have certain domain experience, whatever it is, all those things make that less of a good business. Still a good idea, awesome idea, and as it turns out, sure enough, many millions and millions and billions of dollars are being moved across electronic transfer for healthcare payments. But being too early is the same as being wrong, as they say, and I would also add to that, if you don't have the right formula that you bring to solve that problem, you may struggle more than you think.
On the good idea, good business concept, could you sum up, when you talk to other startups, how do you describe that to them, and how do you show them that there's a difference there?
Yeah.
Because that is, I think that's part of the problem with most startups that struggle.
Yeah, so I think it's very circumstantial, and I have conversations, and the pattern of the conversation is, okay, tell me about your business, tell me about your market, tell me about your team. Well, okay, what about this, what about that? And then it's not until the end of a conversation like that where you really understand the particulars of the circumstance, where you can say, all right, so here will be the challenge of that business, right? So businesses that have, for example, two-sided markets or multi-sided markets, right? Awesome ideas, right? If they existed, you'd want to use them, right? Probably not if they didn't have critical mass. So how are you going to get critical mass? You got to get critical mass on one side or the other, and eventually on both. So you look for the patient side, and you work with them first, and hopefully by the time you've got some critical mass on one side, you can start to turn on the faucet for the other side. So how do you solve that problem? If you don't have a good answer for that problem, you just made your startup fail on paper. Congratulations, that's awesome. I try to do that all the time. And I think it takes not just some work, but it takes some humility. To say, that's a question I can't answer, but the idea is so good that I'm sure I'll fix it. No, you may not fix it. Go find somebody who knows about that problem, share your idea with them, and see if they can help you fix it on paper before you build it, right? It's funny, I love lean, huge advocate. It's what I like about it is it didn't just spring out of thin air, and other principles too. It came out of experience.
It's anecdotal.
But it came out of experience. It came out of years and years of entrepreneurs trying to do one thing or another, and figuring out what worked and what didn't. And after going through a few startups, I had already sort of got my mind in the mode of, I'm not building anything again, right? After doing it so many times, I'm not building anything again until I know that there's a customer who will want to buy this, right? And even if you solve that problem, that doesn't mean you're done, right? I would say that the most common thing that I see early entrepreneurs miss, or as I like to say, whistle past the graveyard, is cost of acquisition versus lifetime value of customer. And it's so alluring to have something that people are starting to use, right? It feels like you're there. But if you're paying $10 to make $5, you're in trouble, right? Unless you have a really good story about how you're going to change that. And of course, you got to do a lot of experimentation to figure that out, and it's not always obvious up front. But if you can't tell a credible story about how that problem would be solved, you should lose sleep, right? You may have a lot of ideas you want to test. That's okay. But if you don't have some credible ideas that you think you can test that will solve that problem, and this often happens when entrepreneurs have an itch they want to scratch, right? Passion, right? That's, we love to talk about passionate entrepreneurs. And passion's great, but passion's also a blind spot. And it makes you not worry about some of the things I think you should worry about, especially around the business side of things. So people who are passionate just about the particular problem that they want to solve, I think that's necessary, but it's not sufficient. If you don't have passion for what you're doing in some way, you should go get a job at Amazon.
What I see is, as we're talking about the idea, it's like I see so many founders, and especially technical, they get so excited about this idea, this creative thing.
Yeah.
And look, they don't necessarily.
And just because it's useful and it's awesome, and you have a room full of 100 people and say, who would like to use this thing? And everybody puts their hand up. It's like, oh, that feels like I should do this, right? And I say no. I say, now go get a spreadsheet and figure out what it's going to cost you to build it, what's going to cost you to sell it, and then see if you should do it, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs do very little work on sizing their market, and at a level of detail that's not like, oh, we're in a $12 billion market. Really? People are making choices to spend $12 billion on things just like you, but they're spending it in other places? No, well, it turns out they spend 12 million on this category of thing, right? So you're going after a $12 million market. What if you're really successful? What does that look like, right? But if you love it, if you're passionate about it, and there's lots of, some I think, apocryphal stories about entrepreneurs who, didn't listen to the naysayers, right? They believed in what they were doing. They charged on. They pressed through, and that's great when they succeed. But for everyone that succeeds, there's 99 that pressed on, even though everybody told them there's no business there, man. That's a great idea, but there's no business there. No, that's what Steve Jobs said. Don't listen to them. So I'm not going to listen to you, and I'm going to keep doing this. And I think that's why it's really important for entrepreneurs to find advisors. People who will give them honest feedback and challenge them on their assumptions.
So you're an advisor. How would you encourage other founders to approach possible advisors?
Yeah, so I've thought a lot about that, partly from just the experience of being approached by a number of folks and how I deal with that, and what I like to see and what I think is effective, and seeing other things work. And actually, I wrote a piece about this in, I forget, GeekWire, Xcon or something. I think you need to first establish relevance for the person you want to get, right? And understand that there are tiers. You may want to go get Jonathan Sposato as your advisor. Jonathan's awesome, smart guy, humble guy, love Jonathan. You may be too early for him, right?
Yeah.
So if he's at one tier, who's a tier down or two tiers down? And I think if you think about where you're at realistically, acknowledging your limitations, where you're at and where you need to go, and figure out who within arm's reach is either at the same level, because you can get a lot of value out of just kind of collaborating, and who's a level up. If you find yourself trying to go after, some Andy Sack. I want Andy Sack. Yeah. I had one guy, hey Bob, you know Andy, right? I'm like, yeah, I know Andy. Hey, we'd love to get him as an advisor. And I'm like, yeah, you and everybody else, right? I'm like, and I was just very frank. I said, you guys are not ready for Andy, right? You don't have a product, customers, right? I mean, you might get a 15-minute phone conversation with Andy if you're lucky. I might be able to make that happen, but that's not who you need, right? You need to find someone who's solved the problems that you're currently working on, because the kind of problems that Andy and Dan Shapiro and these other, the kinds of problems they can solve for you are the best use of their time is the really hard advanced problems. Not like, yeah, you should go talk to customers, right? Go have coffee with Andy. You know what he's going to tell you? Go talk to customers, right? So finding a good fit for an advisor, and then being very respectful of their time and being methodical about the way you ask for help, deliberate and thoughtful. Pick that advisor, right? That's the guy I want, right? Like, hey, you're awesome. Will you be my advisor?
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of people who are terrific advisors for startups who are not celebrities and have never done a startup before. Industry experts are some of your most solid advisors.
Would you suggest having a number of them?
Oh yeah, you got to have a number. Yeah. You're going to have different kinds of problems, and not very many people are really good at everything.
Yeah.
So you need to find someone who understands sales in your space, understands product in your space, understands the technology, understands different components of your business, and make a list. And you can have, there's no reason why you can't have 10, 20, informal advisors. Just people say, yeah, if you need help, you can call me, right? You write them down on a spreadsheet. That's the people I can call when I have that kind of problem. Yeah. An advisory board is a little bit different, right? And those people you need to be very selective, I think, about, that person is an ideal fit for me, for this company, because he or she's gonna bring that particular value to the problem set, whatever the journey that you're on. You recognize that person as someone who can do that. But informal advisors, I think you should have a stable of people you can reach out to.
I agree. I have some around my life too, and it's awesome. You meet with them, and you just kind of hammer things out. And
totally.
It's they've been there before.
Yeah, and I'll say too, don't expect advisors or mentors or anybody to understand your business like you do. You've been working on it for 6 months, for 6 years. You know so much more, and that's why it's so important to be very specific about that thing, because we all have experiences. Some are relevant, some are not. If we have a conversation, you tell me about your startup, you struggle with something, I'm going to map that to my experience. I'm going to say, okay, here's how I think about that. Yeah. I might be completely off base. It's your company, though. You need to decide, is what I told you material, like specifically material to the problem you're trying to solve, or is there a story behind that you can glean some value out of without saying, well, I'm not going to make that decision, but now I just learned something about the way that person thought about that problem. You need to figure out how to get value, but just listen and do not argue, right? Small a argument is death to, I think, a relationship with an advisor. Big A argument, right? A formal I'm not sure I agree, because what about this? Having that sort of dialogue is awesome, right? And good mentors, I think, like to have that dialogue. But if you're like, oh, geez, you don't even know you have no idea, man. That's totally wrong, blah, 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 blah. And don't expect that all mentors are going to come, with this very effective sort of Socratic approach. Let me understand your problem. Here's what I think.
A lot of them are be very direct.
They're like, oh yeah, you should do this. You're going to fail if you don't do that, right? And it drives me nuts, frankly, when I hear other mentors or advisors, and certainly if I have that sort of an exchange where somebody just they think they understand all about my business, and they're just going to in 30 minutes, they're going to figure out the one thing that I need to do, and if I don't do it, I'm going to fail, without getting deep. If they go deep and they say, this is a serious problem, if you don't fix this, you're going to fail, I'm all ears. But if we have a cursory conversation, and we're talking about that lots of, and they just sort of, pronounce, you got to do that. So you got to do that. I'm just like, okay, thank you very much. I may never talk to you again, but I appreciate that. And just take it, right? And don't let it stop there. I mean, even when I have that feeling like, oh man, I know so much that person doesn't understand, and there's a really good reason why that's not the right approach for the problem I'm trying to solve. I don't hold it against them, because they didn't have the knowledge. I wasn't effective enough to communicate exactly what I cared about to get to the solution. So I don't hold it personally, but you see a style. Look for mentors who have a style around helping you solve a problem, not telling you the answer.
So as an advisor to Techstars startups and companies in that realm, what are you seeing, if you could maybe package it in an answer, what are you seeing that that they're doing right? Like, what do you see that startups now are like, they're the ones that get it?
Yeah.
They're getting traction. They did something right.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, it's not all the same, but.
Well, I'd say Techstars in general is really, really good at optimizing on team, like smart people who can execute, whether or not they have the right market, the right product, the right sales model. Just finding really bright people who think fast and can build stuff and are open to coaching. Techstars is really good at that. And I think, in general, entrepreneurs in the last handful of years, and I've been doing this for a really long time, relatively speaking, they've gotten much better at iterating and testing, and sort of encapsulate all the good bits about the lean movement, and that's become a common sort of.
So maybe just shortening the cycles and learning quicker.
But I'll say, what I really like is when I see an entrepreneur going through a lean cycle, where they're like, I've got this idea and I'm going to go test. I'm going to test this, that, and the other thing, and I'm going to build a little bit. I'm going to do my MVP, and I'm going to iterate. I love it when they're honest about themselves. Like, I really don't know if this is going to work, right? There's no experimenter bias in there. Like, you can take a problem, and I can go find the data to support that this is the right thing to do. And I can go talk to customers. I can lead my customers, and they'll tell me what I want to hear if it's the right customer, or the wrong customer, really. But the ones who are like, I'm working on this thing. I don't know if it's going to be any good or not, but I'd really love to get your idea about it, right? What are your thoughts? Or even in some circumstances, like, I'm working on this thing. I don't think it's a good idea, right? But I owe it to myself to figure out whether or not there's something there. So, let me share with it what it is. You tell me what you like and what you don't like. Fully open to someone and encouraging someone. When I talk to some early entrepreneurs, it's clear that, and it's fewer of them now, but there's a phenomenon where entrepreneurs want to go hear really good things about. It feels good. You tell someone,
reinforcement.
That's awesome. Really? Oh, that's cool. So don't talk to your family and friends, right? Tell them what you're doing. Expect them to love you and support you. And that's really great. And next time you meet a stranger and they're like, oh, that's great. Oh, wow, awesome idea. Oh, yeah, I'd use that. Go, thank them very much. Smile and nod, and go find somebody who says, that's a terrible idea. I'd never use that. That's who you have to find. Those are the people who actually help you with your business. The people who just love what you're doing, they're great support. They can get you through the dark times. But you really need to go find people who think your idea sucks. And that takes some fortitude. Like, go find people who think my idea sucks. Mostly we're looking for reinforcement, right? We're looking out for people to say, oh yeah, that is cool. I like that a lot, right?
Is that just so you can be shown the other side of like what you're not seeing?
Yeah, well, you have, so this passion that you have about your idea brings with it a set of blinders, right? Yeah. That you have to, I think, intentionally break through, right? And recognize that you're so close to this and you love it so much and you see so much of the value that you're going to bring with this that you're not looking at the other bits around it, right? Lots of entrepreneurs are very product focused, right? Like, I'm going to build this product. I'll talk to entrepreneurs like, okay, where are you at? Oh, here's where we are. We're fixing these tweaks. We talked to some customers. They want us to add this, that, and the other thing. Pardon me. And it's great. So you're going to have a great product. And I say, okay, that's great. I trust you guys are really competent engineers, designers, UI, UX. You guys are going to nail that part. Who are you talking to who's going to help you make the business better? Not the product. You've got to have a great product. It's a cost to entry, but it doesn't win. Good products don't win. Good products with all the other stuff wrapped around it, that's what wins, right? So, don't be too in love with your product. Don't make it a shitty product. It probably won't succeed if it's really shitty. But the bar for being successful on product quality is a much lower bar than the bar that is set for the business model, right? For the revenue model, for cost of acquisition versus lifetime value and how you're going to market.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like what you're saying is execution, if you will, right?
Yeah, so that's partly what execution means. We throw that word around a lot. Yeah. I dare you to get 10 people who throw that word around. So tell me what execution means, answers. Right? Yeah, it's not one thing. It's a lot of things, and it's different for different companies. But at the end of the day, it's getting shit done, right? And if you're getting shit done from, I would say, a position of aggressive humility, right? I have a bone to pick with sort of the asshole founders in the world who I have no patience for. Then you're probably executing in the right direction. But just keep doing stuff. And that's been really hard for me with Montango, the company I've been working on. Team, I've learned a lot over all these startups. A lot of tactical things, a lot of strategic things. the number one thing I've learned, or that's been reinforced, is how important team is. And not just talent. You have to have an amazingly talented team. You have to have a team of people that will work with you, right? And that you enjoy working with. But you also have to have people you can trust. And you have to have people that have the, for lack of a better word, the scruples that I think is necessary to build a sustainable company that's not going to have a lot of trouble. And so I've learned a lot of lessons, and so I'm very, very picky about who I'll work with. And I've spent a lot of time, finding the right people to work with. Sometimes I regret that. It's like, well, can you just settle a little bit, right? There'll be other opportunities to bring other people on. You can build the team over time, and I agree with that, and I do keep that in mind. But for the sort of core founding team, if you went, this is why one of the reasons why we Techstars and investors, we like teams that have been working together for a long time. They know each other really well. They trust each other. They gel. There's not going to be any surprises. Right? If you and I are working together, you're not going to find me cooking the books, right? If we've known each other since high school, or went to college together and we hung out and we're like good buddies for 7 years, I probably know a lot about you. And if I'm willing to work with you, that says something, right? And I have some sympathy for founders who do need to find somebody, and they don't have a network or connections who can help them build a network to find the right person. So there's a lot of and I love founder dating, and I love some of the other organizations that help connect people. I think that's really valuable. But I think there's a lot of pressure to just like go find a co-founder. And don't do it. I don't think you should try to do very many growth businesses by yourself. There's some exceptions, but by and large, there's a lot of work to get done. There's a lot of specialties that are necessary at the table. You need balance.
What's the one thing if a founder came to you and said, "Hey, I need to find a co-founder, whether it's technical or business." What's the one or two things you tell them to do?
So they're going to necessarily sort of be on a short time frame. I would say start working with them at the soonest possible moment. Right? You're going to talk to each other. You're going to share ideas. You're going to tinker around it. Set up a process where you're actually going to work, and then find the hard parts and like make that conflict happen. Right? Try to disagree, right? Try to have fundamental differences about the direction the company should go, and see how you resolve those. And be really honest about whether or not you think this is someone you're going to get married for the next 7 years. And if it's not, I think you have to find a better way to work together, or go, find someone else. Look at around the community, look at people right? And they're bitter at each other, right? They can't work together. It's totally ineffective. When you see that, how could that possibly end up in a success, right? It's really, diminishingly small probability that two people who don't get along really well can argue, disagree, and then come back together. That's great. But fundamentally don't like each other, then I can't think of any examples where guys like that went on and just killed it.
No, my story, right? And, we're still really good friends, but it just, the dynamics weren't exactly.
And how long did you guys work together before you?
About 6 months, 7 months. And I went through a period of time that I was looking for a co-founder or another CTO, and found him, and we connected, and it was one of those serendipitous. We were surfed together, and it was just like. So I think that my advice to people is you got to put yourself out there. You got to get in environments. If you are looking for a partner, you need to go to the meetups. You need to go to hackathons. Hackathons are great to just somehow find a new team to work together for a few days. But it's a tough place to be. You feel lonely, but you got to put yourself out there.
No, you do. That's actually interesting. I like that a lot. One of my favorite quotes by entrepreneurs in town, Jonathan Sposato, was when he had sold Picnic, he went around and gave some talks about it. And people were asking, like, how did the acquisition happen? How'd you make that, what'd you do to engineer that? And how'd you make that happen? And he's like, I didn't. And he quoted, I think it was Green Beret, Special Forces, something like that, said, look, if you're going to go in and rescue a bunch of hostages, you don't plan out every little bit and then go do that. And the phrase that he used, and I love this, is you put yourself in play and you let the situation develop, right? And putting yourself in play is super important for early stage entrepreneurs. When I think about the successful entrepreneurs that in Seattle, They are literally one phone call away from virtually anyone they need to talk to.
Very much
right?
so, yeah.
Now take some guy who just left, some company and wants to do something. Who's he one phone call away from? His brother, right? So you owe it to yourself to give yourself that advantage by building a network, a quality network. Don't, if you turn it into a party and you're just like schmoozing all the time, you're probably missing something.
Yeah.
But thinking again deliberately about like what kind of people do I want to meet? Where are they? How can I develop a relationship with them? Not just go asking for stuff. How do I give back? And starting to deliberately surround yourself with really smart people who you can tap for expertise and advice and so forth. Super critical, and I think it's often overlooked. It's one of the reasons why I've continued to build Startup Poker 2.0, because the relationships that come out of, you get the right people together who share enough commonality but can help each other in ways that they might not otherwise be able to find that help from peers. Being an entrepreneur or being a founder, as you said, can be very lonely, right? I mean, it's you and your co-founder and who else, right? And to be able to surround yourself with a whole bunch of other people who are struggling through the same stuff you are, right? And at different times, right? I've had people, now we've been doing Poker 2.0 now for 7 years, and there are people who still come who came back in the early days, right? And I see where they are now and where they were then, and I've watched the cycle of like, they've got this great announcement, they just closed some funding, then they have this like, I'm sorry to say this just happened and we're kind of bummed, and then it's up and down. But surrounding yourself with people like that is really, really important. When I think about my own career, most of the really good stuff that's happened to me has come from people I know. So, who do you know? And if you don't know people who can help you as a startup, you may still be successful, right? There's a lot to be said for just, go out and kill it by yourself. But you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not connecting with people who might be able to help. And why wouldn't you, right? And the sad truth is, and I was a geek too, but
it's hard.
Tech founders are not natural networkers, right? They're the ones standing in the corner with a beer in their hand, waiting for somebody to come up and ask them what they do, right? That's a very ineffective way to connect with the startup community. So, like you said, put yourself out there, right? Be uncomfortable. Give yourself permission to be uncomfortable, right? You're going to go to some event, NWIN, WTIA, GeekWire, whatever. Just like, okay, tonight is going to be the night where I'm uncomfortable all night long, and I'm just going to go up and I'm like, hi, my name's Bob. What do you do, right? Isn't this an awesome party, right? And then it'll go from there, right? But you got to do that. And you got to do that over and over and over again until it stops feeling like you're an idiot and you're embarrassed. And you'll be surprised at what happens, right? If you went to a big event and there were hundreds of people in the room and you made it a goal, I'm going to actually talk to 30 people, 30 different people who I do not know. And when you go to a networking event and you see people that you know there, you got to go up and say, hey, hi, how's it going? Good to see you, man. What's up? Okay. All right, well, look, I'm going to go talk to some people. And get away from the people that you know.
That's the biggest.
It's not helpful, right? Go find people that you don't know and randomly introduce yourself, and you'll be surprised where the conversation goes. I'd be shocked if a serious, early stage entrepreneur went to a big event and had the goal of meeting 30 people, that they wouldn't find somebody in that crowd who's like, I know somebody you got to meet, right? What's your email address? I'm going to connect you with so and so, and you're like, oh, not that company. That's like who I want to meet, or there's something serendipitous will happen. So putting yourself in that situation is really important. And if you're an entrepreneur that has some fear and trepidation around being in front of people and talking to people, you owe it to yourself to get better and better at that. You may never feel utterly comfortable, but you can get better at it. Lots of people do.
Absolutely right. Well, I think we're about out of time.
All right. Cheers, man.
Cheers. Thank you for coming on.
All right. This is fun.
Enjoy.